We're live. I forgot that I pressed the live button there for a second. Um, it's Monday, start of a new week, and I hope it's off to a good start for you guys. It's kind of a weird start for me. Um, for one, it's been extremely windy the past 2 days. Um, Gusts of winds up to 40 miles an hour. So during my early morning walk, there's been tree branches and stuff strewn about. And then I did another 2 mile walk with Mocha and Misty, and it's still windy. It's supposed to be all the way through. There's a wind advisory all the way to 5 o'clock this evening. I always love that term, wind advisory. Of course, I took it to mean something completely different than what they mean. For me, it meant listen to the wind and what advice is going to be passed through the breeze. What am I going to hear? What is the air itself in motion trying to tell me? So, yeah, probably not what they mean when they offer their wind advisory. However, it is a good point to consider that there are everything is speaking to us in terms of vibratory quality, that we only have to learn to listen. I read about that the other day in one of my live sessions. That actually I talked a little bit about it when I read about elephants' feet, and that an elephant's foot is so delicate, so sensitive, that it can pick up the vibration of a rainstorm several miles away. When it's not raining here, several miles away, they will pick up that vibration. And if they need water, they'll head in that direction. Absolutely amazing to consider that the largest mammal walking on Earth has feet so delicate that it can pick up the vibrational pattern of a weather system, of raindrops hitting the ground from miles and miles away. Um, in the blog post, Lyrical Prose, I liken it to the language of nature, the language of life. What we forget is that we are engaged in it all the time. We just no longer listen. But of course, our body responds. We act um, in accordance to the vibrations that we pick up. We just don't realize it, and we call it intuition, or we call it inspiration, or I just had a gut feeling. What we're doing is picking up the vibratory principles of whatever it is that we happen to be attuned to at that moment. If you get a sudden inspiration, um, it's not something that is simply handed to you out of nowhere. It is something that's already in existence that we pick up. We pick up those vibrations and then follow it. Bodily, body has a wisdom completely of its own that we've largely become unaware of. Uh, our friend Dr. Destiny, PhD, or Destiny Forever Walks, PhD, mentioned that in one of her um, talks she did on YouTube, that it's the body that heals. No doctor has ever healed a broken leg, broken limb, broken anything. Um, no doctor has ever cured the flu or the cold or whatever. They do help. They put that limb in a cast to allow the body's own inherent healing to take place. Somewhere along the line, we started putting more trust in the medical establishment than our own healing power. That's not saying that we shouldn't trust the medical establishment. It's saying that we should put equal trust in our body's own ability to heal. Um, as well, don't limit the body. Don't limit the body to this, in yoga terms, it would be called a sheath, a garment, the body. One aspect of the body. There are several uh, yogic bodies from the called koshas. Let's Google that up. Any excuse to hit the Google button. Koshas are considered layers of body, starting with, depending on how you look at it, we could start greater and work our way downwards, or we could start material and work our way into the immaterial. So we could call them layers of being. So we have the food sheath, it's called in yoga, because this body, the solidness, depends on the energy of food. It gets its energy from food. Then we have the pranayama kosha. Pranayama kosha is that ethereal kosha. We're dependent on breath, the pranic energy that we draw in through breathing. And then the mental sheath, which is where our thoughts are occurring. We think they're occurring in the brain, but neurosurgeons could slice open the brain. They'll never find a thought. They'll never find a thing that is called a thought. You won't look in there and say, there it is. I've pinpointed an actual thought. It's not going to happen. Thought is simply an energetic pattern that is making its vibratory course through the mind. Then we have the intellect sheath. The intellect is where all those great ideas, where inspiration, artistic design, all of that takes place in the mental sheath. And then we have the last, and this is when we enter cosmic consciousness, the bliss sheath. Sorry, I'm petting my cat. She's only concerned with the food sheath. So you can see that from where we started here, I went from the gross material, the body, earth, the sense of touch and feel, and then each level got more subtler and subtler and subtler until we were in that bliss sheath, which is also known as cosmic consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Christ consciousness, samadhi. Those are a description, an energetic description of who we are. So we don't simply heal at the food sheath. Doctors help take care of that. But modern doctors don't do anything for the pranic sheath, for the prana sheath. They don't do anything for the mental sheath. Maybe some might touch upon it when they enter that mind body, but they're skipping right through the pranic sheath. They don't do anything for the intellectual sheath, and they certainly don't do anything for the bliss sheath, nor should they have to, because that sheath is untouched by any of the material layers. But that's where all the other layers come from, starting from there and getting grosser and grosser and grosser until we're here. According to yoga philosophy and psychology as well, because it's the same with when we are, let's say we go to therapy, a therapist is only going to deal with that mental sheath. They're only going to deal with the thoughts that we have that lead to behaviors that we would like to modify in some way. And Buddhist psychology and yogic psychology, they start from the other way and work their way down. Start with samadhi, start with bliss consciousness, and work your way through. Doesn't mean that you ignore the others until then. You could be doing asanas, exercise for the physical body. You can be doing breath work, pranayama for the pranic body. You could be doing therapy for the mental sheath. You could be doing some type of, let's say, yoga nidra, pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses, or self-inquiry for the intellectual sheath. and then that deep, deep meditation to get in touch with the bliss sheath. So you could work them all at once, or start with meditation, work your way down. I think an integrated approach is probably the best bet. An integrated approach would be how a yogic healer, maybe a Buddhist psychologist, would um, approach it. So, um, and again, I think that's what um, Destiny was hinting at when she said um, the body itself doesn't heal itself, or a doctor doesn't heal itself, but the body has its own inherent healing system in place. And of course, you take that body from this body all the way to the um, universe itself. They're all layers of us. So that's why environmentally, what we do to the environment, we do to us. We can't escape it. And the sooner that is realized universally, politically especially, the better. Because then we will stop um, harming people. And this is also why Jesus urged people um, to welcome the stranger, that it's the least among us, that he would be the one that he was with, that he would talk with, that he would teach to and preach. He didn't go to the rich and offer them lessons in Christianity, lessons in the way of Christ. He was down in the trenches. He was working with people like you and me, and those that would be considered the dredge of society at the time. Jesus certainly didn't hang out with the 1%ers, nor did the Buddha. Of course, they didn't deny them either. That's the rule of a true healer, is you don't pick and choose who you heal. Now, they might predominantly spend time with the people with less, but because they need a healer more so than the 1%ers. I'm not sure I actually like that description, but it gets the point across. Our friend Odam's Homestead is here. Hey, just Yogi doing burpees in his basement. Odom, how are you? Did you get a sunny day yesterday? I don't remember. I know we had a chance to talk Saturday. I don't remember if we chatted yesterday or not. I know you did say a sunny day was coming. We finally had some sun today, but the wind is blowing really bad. This week, though, tomorrow it climbs up to 68, and then I think 70, and then 74 in the next 3 days. Really looking forward to that. We'll be taking a longer walk. About 2 miles from my home, there's a turtle pond. Really small pond, smaller than the one I have right down the street from my house, 1/4 mile from my house. And of course, we have turtles in my pond here, sometimes snapping turtles, mostly box turtles, mostly, I forget the other, it's more of a water turtle, but not a snapping turtle. This one has huge ancient turtles, so old they literally have moss and turf growing on their back, and they're huge. Always worth making a trip out there on a warm day when they'll be out and we get to see them. So I hope to get some good video clips, and I'll do some turtle shorts, which I haven't been able to do since fall and winter, when the turtles go into the mud. Odom says, no, not much sun yesterday. It was only 50s down to 28 last night. 60 now. 60 is a comfortable temperature. I'm actually surprised. You're only a little bit warmer than we are. We're getting 58, I think, today. I would think Tennessee, with the exception of being in the mountains, would be a little warmer this time of year. Of course, any prediction you make on the winter, on the weather, is bound to be wrong. I wrote this morning um, in my blog about the month of March. March seems to be a season entirely of its own, containing aspects of winter, containing aspects of spring, but neither fully of each has yet to become uh, any one thing, and it just incorporates everything. Odom says we get frost up to April 15th. Huh. We get occasional snow here in April, never amounting in anything. We got snow. Um, this was a while back. On the day I did my first 100-mile race, we had ice and snowstorms, which made the race all the more memorable. I was I finally finished my first 100-mile race when I was 50 years old, after 3 attempts and 3 not getting to the finish line. I think I made it to 66 miles the first time, 60 miles the second, 60 miles the third, thereabouts. Um, and then finally putting everything together when I turned 50 and getting that buckle. The good thing is that bad weather made it all the more meaningful and rewarding. That good friend of mine who is considered an ultra running legend, a great, was the first person to ever do what's called the Grand Slam of ultra running, which are the 4 big, tough races across the country. Um, Leadville 100, Western States, 2 really big ones. Um, and I forget the other 2, but they're pretty big and they're pretty tough. And he did it in the course of it. They're, I think, like 4 months apart each, and he did them all, swept through them. Anyway, he told me about ultra running. It's a series of problem solving. Problem comes up, you solve it, and you keep running. You go on. Problem comes up and you don't solve it, the race is over. So just think of it as each problem that comes up, you only have to deal with that. You don't need to think about the next 70 miles ahead or whatever. You just deal with this problem. And you do it, and then you move on. It's that way in everything in life. Everything. You know, life isn't supposed to be devoid of problems. I'm not even sure if we would like it if it was. So we just solved one problem at a time, and we continue to live. We don't have to think of them as obstacles. I mean, we can think of them any way we want. But imagine if we didn't have that thought. If there's no such thing as an obstacle, we didn't have that concept. The exact same thing popped up, but we no longer labeled it. Well, this is an obstacle. This is a problem. It's just a thing. And we deal with it and we move on until the next thing. A teacher that I know of, Sailor Bob Adamson, wrote an entire book about that, basically, which was titled, well, it was his teachings put together by another friend, Gilbert Schultz. What's wrong with right now if you don't think about it? So even we say something bad happens to us, without the thought how bad it is, what would it be? I'm not saying that, we would always like and enjoy everything, because even that would be placing a concept, placing a label on something. It would just be, and we would deal with it. And then we would continue moving on. We'd continue with life. We would continue living. Same way you climb a mountain, same way you run an ultra marathon, same way you get through life. Same way you Grow things. You start where you start. You start with a seed, you start with the ground, and then you water, you nourish, um, you do everything you need to do. When a problem comes up with your plant, you deal with it, you tend the plant. Before you know it, you have food on your table. Um, Odom says, good way to look at it. Really, when you think about it, we're doing it anyway. So no matter how we look at it, we're still doing it. We're still dealing with the problem. But if we just refuse to label it, maybe even just slightly, think about a lot of the things that we consider emotional issues. We see a therapist over. What if it wasn't, if we didn't put that label on the thing that occurred? Would we still have those emotional scars that we carry with us? I'm not denying that things like that have an impact. That's part of yogic psychology as well, called samkaras, mental impressions. They're mental grooves that are so deeply ingrained that we react every time something occurs that reminds us of that, then we're right into that pattern and we react as if it's happening all over again, even if it's something completely different. So we have these mental patterns for everything that occurs in life, even reacting in such a certain way that only slightly resembles. Think how many times, how upset we've got in traffic jams, or when somebody bumps into us, or when somebody refuses to hold a door open for us, or we get in an argument with our spouse and completely overreact. Why is that? It's because we're reacting through the lens of that samkara. I've heard it likened to the old-fashioned LPs. I hate saying old-fashioned LPs because I'm old-fashioned. Great memories of my life were listening to records from 45s to LPs. But for the younger kids who might stumble upon this, the LPs, you put the needle on a track and you heard a specific song. No matter what song you might want to hear, if you put the needle on that specific track, that's what you're always going to hear. If you want a different reaction, if you want a different song, you got to put your needle on a different track. Or better, recognize that track. Recognize the needle and the track itself and respond with awareness, kindness, compassion, and empathy towards yourself to begin with. Once you're aware that it's just a pattern, things become different. Things become different automatically. Odom says that he's learned to let go of a lot. That doesn't surprise me because you mentioned that you said you considered yourself a mean person before you started gardening. Gardening, working with the earth, wonderful way of learning to be responsive versus reactive. You can't get mad at a seed. You can't get mad at what a seed does. If you plant, I always use tomato seeds for some reason as an example. If you plant a tomato seed and a few weeks later you see a tomato plant coming up, you don't step all over the plant and say, I wanted a zucchini. You planted a tomato seed. You get tomatoes. Odom says, I was starting to feel them feelings again. Like you said, letting go. It's all about that letting go. Use the breath. Enter that calmer level. And the thing is that Now you're aware enough. Who knows, 10 years ago, you may not even realize that you were starting to get those feelings. You just were automatically there. The difference now, you're responsive versus before you were reactive. When you're reactive, you have no choice. Someone presses your button, life presses your button, whatever, society presses your button, and bam, you react. You're there. You have no choice. Reaction is that fight or flight. You enter fully into the sympathetic nervous state. Responsive is different. Responsive is slower. Responsive means that you're aware of what's going on. And in that awareness, you might choose to respond in a forceful manner, or you might choose to walk away, or you might choose to just smile, accept it all, let it go. That's why I always love the word responsibility. It's our responsibility. No matter what comes into our life, it's our responsibility. And that's in the sense of our ability to respond, response ability. It's a game changer. That's what we really should be going for in therapy. We can go way back and reveal the source to all our problems, but just knowing the source doesn't change anything because we still have those emotional imprints. We still have those same cares that we're going to keep reacting to and reacting to and reacting to. And we could say, well, that's because my mother didn't hold me long enough when I was a kid, that my father told me I would never amount to anything, that my dog ran away when I was 6 years old. None of these ever happened to me, by the way. But we could say all of that, and we could be aware of all of that. But it doesn't change how we react when a button is pressed and that samkara is triggered. And again, bam, we're back in that state. And we're lashing out and we're lashing out and we're lashing out. And then we wonder why. As soon as you know that it's just a mental imprint and that there are ways to erase that imprint, to soften it, to put the needle on another track and hear an entirely different song, which means your entire life is changed. For Odom, it really sounds like it was learning the garden. It was getting out and getting his fingers in the earth, getting his hands in the earth, and lovingly helping something grow, helping life spread, getting that sense of joy. And in that sense of joy, you become more responsive, less reactive. I mentioned before, I talked about some of my friends here in the chat and likening them to yogis, their own yogic system. Odom is a yogi, gardening. That's his practice. In yogic terms, it's called sadhana, which is basically means spiritual practice. Different ones for different people. But for Odom, his sadhana, his spiritual practice, or part of it, is helping things grow. Feeling the sunshine, feeling the rain, nourishing a seed to its fruition. Odom says, grandkids and gardening made a big difference for me. For me, it was really meditation that started changing things. And even with meditation, took a little bit of time, but I could feel it almost right away. I knew my first time meditating that something was different. Things seemed lighter. And my life started changing. Habits that I had for a long time, from smoking to drinking, little by little started dropping from my life without me really, really trying. Hey, Kayla Boo is here. Good morning, Kayla. How are you? She's saying big likes. I appreciate that. We're sort of talking psychology. yogic psychology, Buddhist psychology. Um, Here's what I love about Buddhist psychology versus, we could even call it Buddhist therapy, versus regular therapy, versus Western psychology. They start with your Buddhist psychology, starts with your inherent goodness. Um, Instead of going to see a therapist and saying, these are the things that I need to change. I'm a horrible person. I cheated on my spouse. Um, I don't love myself. You can have this big laundry list of all these horrible, horrible things you think about yourself. Some of them might be true. I don't know. Um, in Buddhist psychology, it's the opposite. We don't start with your problems. We start with your inherent goodness, with your inherent qualities of grace and kindness and empathy and compassion. And then we work our way down, little by little by little, addressing these issues. And when you realize you're not fundamentally broken, but there's issues appearing in life, issues appearing in you. You are not your issues. You're the awareness of the issues themselves. And as awareness, there is an aspect of you that remains forever untouched by any issue or problem that occurs in life. Doesn't mean that you're separate from them, it just means that you're untouched. You're the observer, the witness to all that passes. And that brings a great, great sense of peace, because it means I'm going to be okay. It means I'm already okay. It means I got some things I need to work on, but I'm not a bad person. Um, Decades ago, the Zen master Suzuki Roshi, um, when he went to, I forget which school, to give a lecture to the psychology class, people in training to be a therapist. And this is when Zen was still relatively new in the United States. And he looked at the students and he said, each and every one of you is completely whole and perfect just the way you are. And of course, all the students smiled and they sort of nudged themselves because, hey, that's the kind of thing a Zen master is supposed to say, because they're, let me get those quotes in, spiritual. You're supposed to say the spiritual stuff, but hey, we're scientists. We deal in facts, problems, issues. Um, we don't need to hear that kind of stuff. And then he continued to smile and he said, and you could all use a little bit of work too, which caused them to laugh out loud because they didn't expect to hear that. And that's true. That's Buddhist psychology. Each and every one of you here in this conversation, stumble upon it later, you are perfect and whole and lovable and lovely just the way you are right now. And you could use a little bit of work. Um, hey, Simone, how are you? Good evening, Eric, my friend. So it's evening for you. Uh, it's mid-afternoon here for me. And I think Odom is an hour um, behind. And I'm not sure where Kayla is. So, yep, Simone, we're talking problems and issues and therapy, and again, Buddhist psychology, yoga psychology, the little things that we can do to make getting through life just a little bit easier sometimes. For Odom, it's gardening. Um, for me, it's yoga, meditation, as well as nature. I liken it all to yoga, and I liken it all to nature. There's no real separation between the two. Simone says, doing well, Eric. Thank you. Always good to hear your thoughts. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, Most certainly, nature heals. This is why Jesus gave his sermons outside under a tree. This is why the Buddha became enlightened under a tree. The Buddha sat on beneath the Buddha tree after years of ascetic practices, years of denying himself food, extreme yoga practices, extreme meditation, um, all kinds of stuff, and still hadn't reached that final stage of enlightenment. Was very wise, very knowledgeable, um, but he decided he was going no more. He broke his fast. He was emaciated, almost starving, and a Indian maiden gave him some milk and a bowl of rice, and he was nourished. And he realized going to extremes to gain enlightenment is not going to work. Um, with his new energy and health from being fed, he decided he was going to sit under the Buddha tree and not get up, not come out of meditation until he had gained final liberation, final enlightenment. And he did. And all kinds of demons attacked him to keep him from that realization, but he stayed true, stayed in meditation. When he finally awoken, he realized Four Noble Truths, all from sitting under a tree. Discourses in nature, every modern school or traces their roots to being out in nature. Simone says, I have the pleasure to walk my dog every day outside, and it is indeed relaxing and good for the soul. It's definitely is. It's a meditation completely on its own. No matter how you approach it, letting your mind wander or bringing it back to what you're doing, being mindful of the walk, just being out in nature in and of itself is healing. Odom says, yes, nature will heal you mentally and physically. Definitely. And again, this is why, people with all through the ages, the desert fathers, to understand the ways of God, to live a spiritual life, they turned to the desert. Moses climbed Mount Sinai to receive the sermon of the Ten Commandments. Jesus went to the desert. Krishna hung out with the sheep herders roaming the hills. My favorite Greek god, Pan, god of the wild places and fertility, would roam the hills of Macedonia, playing his pan flute, causing the sheep to panic. How we got the name pan flute and panic as well. So, all right, guys, with that, I think we're heading towards the end of the conversation. It's coming up on 2. It's when I usually do my last meditation practice, speaking of sadhanas practices. And I'll be back later this evening. I'm going to read live from my blog. I've been reading some older stuff from my blog, mostly nature, mostly the things that I encounter on my walks. Yesterday was slugs, unexpectedly for some, and the day before was ducks. I forget what it was the day before, but man, when you open to nature, it always has something to impart. Trick is, get out of your head. Don't look at a slug and think, what is a slug? Slimy, gross slug. Have to say to me, get out of the way. Get out of your own way and listen to life speaking to life. It's as simple as that. There's no barrier between you and a slug. It's one aspect of life opening itself to communicate with another aspect of life. It's about getting that vibratory response, one being to another being, nothing in between. And when you do that, you got something pretty remarkable to write of. It's been my experience. So, guys, I'll see anyone who wants to pop in later tonight. If not, and you're interested, it's always up there for later. Odom, always appreciate it when you stop in and I get a chance to talk. Kayla Bill, thank you as always for coming. And Simone, it is always an honor when you take time out of your day, being in such a drastic different time zone from here, to make the time, even just to pop in and say hi. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you later. Take care, guys.